Hello friends, in this video we are going to continue the topics that are being connected to national income accounting chapter. Friends, we have discussed many concepts that are being connected to this chapter. In fact, in the last video we are discussing the topic of GDP calculation in India. Now, in fact, I have told that it is the National Statistical Office which calculates GDP in India. Earlier it was CSO. Now, either CSO or NSO, to calculate GDP, what they will do is like they will divide the Indian economy into three producing sectors. And in fact, we have discussed the three producing sectors in the name of primary, secondary, and we have also discussed the tertiary sectors. And in fact, we have discussed what are being included in these three producing sectors అనేది మనం డిస్కస్ చేసాం. Now, prior to this topic, we have done who are residents, who are resident individuals, who are resident institutions, what are resident institutions. So we have discussed intermediate goods, final goods, depreciation, gross national income, net national income, nominal national income, real national income. So many concepts have been covered with regards to this chapter. Now what we are going to do in this video, we are going to continue the topic of GDP calculation which we have like left over. Now once the NSO divides the economy into three producing sectors, now there are three methods where we can calculate GDP. Now we are going to discuss three methods of GDP calculation in India. Three methods. Now the first method which we are going to discuss, it is referred as value added method. Now let us understand what is this value added method. Now what is this value added method and how this method we can use to calculate GDP. So value added method ఏంటంటే, through this method the GDP can be calculated in such a way by adding or sum of gross value added, the sum of gross value added by all producing sectors. Now the sum of all gross value added by all producing sectors, if we add them, then we are going to get the GDP of the country. Now let us understand what is this gross value added. Now when we talk about the gross value added can be derived by, that is equal to the value of gross output of final goods and services minus value of gross output of intermediate goods and services. So this is the formula where we can derive gross value added of a producing sector or of a producing entity. So what is the value of gross output of final good and service minus, like we are deducting the value of intermediate goods and services. Now let us take the example. Suppose we have a producing entity which produces bread. Now the producing entity has produced the bread and it is the final good, and the value of the bread, imagine it as 1000. Now to produce this bread, wheat flour has been used by this producing entity and the value of wheat flour is, imagine it as 500. Now calculate gross value added of this bread producing entity which is bread. Now GVA is equal to value of bread which is 1000 minus value of wheat flour which is 500. I can say the gross value added that is being done by the bread producing entity is 500. So the gross value added of all such producing entities from the different sectors like primary, secondary, tertiary, then it gives us the GDP. So this is the point which we have to keep in mind. So the sum of or addition of GVA, the gross value added of all producing sectors, then it gives us the GDP. Now now if you look at the gross value added, why we need to subtract the value of gross output of intermediate goods and services? Because if we include intermediate goods, now it leads to the problem of double counting. Hence we are subtracting intermediate goods and services. Once we subtract intermediate goods and services, then we are going to get the actual value of GDP contribution. This is the point. And one point which we has to keep in mind is that value added method calculates GDP at the production level or at the production stage level, which means like అంటే ఇప్పుడు ఒక బ్రెడ్ కంపెనీనో లేదో షర్ట్స్ కంపెనీనో వాట్ ఎవర్ ద గుడ్ విచ్ దే హ్యావ్ బీన్ ప్రొడ్యూస్ ఆ స్టేజ్లోనే మనం వీఆర్ ఏబుల్ టు క్యాలిక్యులేట్ జీవీఏ. సో ప్రొడక్షన్ స్టేజ్ లెవెల్ ఆర్ ఫస్ట్ స్టేజ్ ఆఫ్ ప్రొడక్షన్లోనే వీఆర్ ఏబుల్ టు క్యాలిక్యులేట్ ద జీడిపి త్రూ దిస్ మెథడ్. And one more point which we have to understand with regards to value added ఏంటంటే in case of India, value added method is being used to know the GDP contribution of primary sector plus registered manufacturing sector. So to know what is the contribution of the primary sector, which is like agriculture, allied activities, fisheries, forestry, mining and quarrying, and to know the registered manufacturing units contribution, then value added method is being generally used in case of India. So this is a small topic on value added. Now let us understand we will discuss why this method is being used to know the GDP contribution of only few sectors. Now the second method which we are going to discuss is referred as income method. Now let us understand what is this second method of calculation of GDP. The second method of GDP calculation is referred as income method. Now how income method calculates GDP? Now let us understand. So income method simply refers to, or we can calculate GDP through this method, that is referred as the sum of factor incomes, generated in producing final goods and services. So the sum of factor incomes that are being generated in producing final goods and services, if we add all the factor incomes, then we are going to get the GDP, and this method is referred as income method. Now to understand this method, let us recall the circular flow of incomes and expenditures. Now in circular flow lo మనం ఏం డిస్కస్ చేసాం? ఫర్మ్ అనే ఒక సెక్టార్ ఉంది, హౌస్ హోల్డ్స్ అనే ఒక సెక్టార్ ఉంది. Now the firms produce final goods and services. Now to produce these final goods and services, households will supply the factors of production. Now this is the flow which we have done. Now in return, the firms will provide factor incomes or factor payments or factors of factor cost and good anna. Now we have to understand ఏంటంటే జనరల్గా ఫర్మ్స్ ఫైనల్ గూడ్స్ అండ్ సర్వీసెస్ ప్రొడక్షన్ చేసిన స్టేజ్లోనే వీఆర్ గోయింగ్ టు యూజ్ ద వాల్యూ యాడెడ్ మెథడ్. దీని ద్వారా మనం జీడిపి క్యాలిక్యులేట్ చేస్తాం. ఇమాజిన్ for some reasons, if we can't calculate the value of gross output of final goods and services, కొన్ని రీజన్స్ వల్ల మనం ఒక ప్రొడ్యూసింగ్ ఎంటిటీ ప్రొడ్యూస్ చేసిన ఫైనల్ గూడ్స్ అండ్ సర్వీసెస్ వాల్యూను క్యాలిక్యులేట్ చేయలేకపోతున్నాం. దెన్ హౌ క్యాన్ వి క్యాలిక్యులేట్ జీడిపి? సో ద అదర్ వే రౌండ్ ఈజ్ లైక్, ఇప్పుడు ఈ ఫైనల్ గూడ్స్ అండ్ సర్వీసెస్ ప్రొడక్షన్ చేయాలి అంటే హౌస్ హోల్డ్స్ ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ ఆఫ్ ప్రొడక్షన్ సప్లై చేయాలి. ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ ఆఫ్ ప్రొడక్షన్ సప్లై జరుగుతుందంటే factor incomes generate అవుతున్నట్టు. So which means not from this angle we are going to calculate GDP, from this side అనేది, this is how the income method helps in calculating the GDP. Now one more point which we have to keep in mind, which is so important with regards to income method ఏంటంటే, in case of India, compared to the value added method, income method is mostly being used to know the GDP contribution of other sectors. Now what does it mean when I say it is being used to know the GDP contribution of other sectors? Now other sectors include unregistered manufacturing units plus construction plus public utilities plus services. So to know the GDP contribution of these sectors, then the income method is being used. Now the question is, why only income method? The reason why is like, if you look at unregistered manufacturing units ఉన్నాయి. ఈ అన్రిజిస్టర్డ్ మ్యానుఫ్యాక్చరింగ్ యూనిట్స్ అంటే ఏంటి? లైక్ బ్యాంగిల్స్ ఇండస్ట్రీ విచ్ ఇస్ బీయింగ్ రన్ బై హౌస్ హోల్డ్స్, కాపర్ ఇండస్ట్రీ, లైక్ డిఫరెంట్ స్మాల్ ఇండస్ట్రీస్ విచ్ ఆర్ అన్రిజిస్టర్డ్, లెస్ దాన్ 10 వర్కర్స్ ఏదైతే ఉన్నారో, వీ డోంట్ ఫైండ్ రిలయబుల్ డేటా ఆఫ్ దేర్ అవుట్పుట్. సో వాళ్ళు ఎంత బ్యాంగిల్స్ తయారు చేశారు, ఎంత స్మాల్ నెయిల్స్ తయారు చేశారు, సో ఇవి డేటా అనేది మనకు దొరకదు. సో ఎప్పుడైతే ల్యాక్ ఆఫ్ రిలయబుల్ ప్రొడక్షన్ డేటా ఉంటుందో అప్పుడు వాల్యూ యాడెడ్ మెథడ్ ద్వారా హౌ క్యాన్ వి క్యాలిక్యులేట్ జీవీఏ ఆఫ్ దట్ యూనిట్. గ్రాస్ వాల్యూ యాడెడ్ రావాలంటే వీ నీడ్ టు నో ద వాల్యూ ఆఫ్ గ్రాస్ అవుట్పుట్ ఆఫ్ ఫైనల్ గూడ్స్. ఎప్పుడైతే ప్రొడక్షన్ డేటా లేకపోతే దెన్ ఇట్ బికమ్స్ టు యూస్ వాల్యూ యాడెడ్. దట్ ఈస్ వై వీ రిలై ఆన్ ఇన్కమ్ మెథడ్. Now, this is not only the reason. For example, if you look at the cases of services and like the public utilities, services lo enti, for example, there are many services producing entities. While like we are finding good reliable data, but the problem in case of services is that money value of the services calculation edaithe undo, it is problematic. Which means, suppose if we have visited a banking oka bank వెళ్ళాం, we have used banking services. If I ask you what is the money value of banking services which you have used, then it becomes difficult. Ade oka shop ki velli what is the money value of goods which you have bought ante what is the quantity of goods that you have bought multiplied by the price, that is the money value which we have discussed. So similarly, law and order, defense, ఇటువంటి సర్వీసెస్ మనం పొందినప్పుడు if you want to calculate the money value of such kind of services, then it becomes difficult. So if we have lack of reliable data or calculation of money value of production, if it finds difficult, then automatically, so ఇవి ఎప్పుడైతే ఉన్నాయో, so that is where we can't use the value added method of getting the GDP. That is why we rely on the income method to know the GDP contribution of these sectors. This is also one more point which we has to understand. So we have discussed what is value added method. We have also discussed what is income method. Now what we are going to do is like, in fact, in the next video, income method is going to divide the different factor incomes into 3 categories, like compensation of employees and different categories unnai. And at the same time we are going to also discuss how we can calculate the GNP of a country through income method. So once we know this, then we are going to complete the second method of calculation of GDP. So one request from my side is like, so try to listen the concepts, and these concepts, even though it finds difficult in the books, but it is being made easy through these classes. So once you like the videos, then please try to subscribe and share the videos to your fellow mates also. Thank you.